Welcome to Toby Talk number 7. It has been a very long time since I've done one of these, about 3 months in fact. Put it down to me being lazy, or put it down to me just not being fully inspired to put one topic out there. But I'm inspired right now, and I'm not being lazy, so welcome to Toby Talk number 7. We're going to talk live events, mainly because I just came back from ESL One Birmingham, and there's a couple of things that have happened over also the last 2 weeks that have kind of inspired me, also because I've had some questions about this, to talk about live events and things that happen around it. The main thing that I'm focusing on in this Toby Talks is your consumption, you as a viewer, how you actually see these events. Now, let me just bring up, production value. Yeah, so you have a wonderful venue. This is ESL One. Huge event. You can know that by the Mercedes-Benz that's sitting right there. And I just want to just start off with the first question. Why do people actually attend these events? Now, this has happened because there was a debate back when ESL One Frankfurt first began, when we were in the Commerzbank Arena, and one of the teams, I won't name who, basically said that it wasn't competitive to actually be out on the stage, to have a crowd that could potentially give you insight into what's happening inside of the game. And what they suggested was, you keep all those screens that you have in place, and the players will play in a soundproofed room out the back, away from the crowd, in order to keep it competitive. Now, when I first heard this, I was just like, well, what the hell is going on? And you understand then that there is a separation between what is online competitive, playing inside your own room, and what is the show, what is the competition that happens at a LAN event, and what you have to go through it. Yes, you could have a whole bunch of people playing football on a field with no crowd, and this would potentially say, okay, only the best players win. But then you also take out the element that is the crowd, which is the pressure that is applied around that crowd, which is a skill players also have to learn how to deal with. And on top of that, sometimes the crowd is actually like an enhancement for you, because they give you energy, they give you that ability to drive forward. It's the atmosphere that comes from a LAN event, which is why a lot of people turn up. You're still watching a screen, you're still watching a game. I can sit at home with my big screen and say, I can see the game clearer because I am watching my screen at home than I am watching on a big screen where maybe there's lights in my face. So you think about it and go, okay, well, why do I come to an event? It's the atmosphere, it's the ability to be closer to your players, to the personalities who are inside the scene, and then share this experience with a whole bunch of other people outside of what Twitch chat is. Because Twitch chat gives you, and that's I think a reason too why a lot of people still fired up the Twitch chat even if there was a Facebook stream, if they chose to watch that one, of course, because they were like, we want to have a crowd feeling. That's where Twitch chat actually comes in, because you see the mass spam of it, and it's basically a text version of a crowd. So that, in my mind, is the reason why I think a lot of people do come to the events, is because they're looking for that feeling that they're not alone in watching this, and that they're connected with what's going on around it. Of course, this has some changes as well, because there's a lot of ways that events happen. So it's an online consumption of events. Let's not think about the people who are inside the stadium right now, and talk about the coverage which is done for people outside the stadiums. Now, this is probably the best example of that most recently. So welcome to the MDL coverage, a LAN event that was held in China, cast by Beyond the Summit, and they did these trio casts from inside their studio in LA, or just outside of LA in Ontario. So this is the BTS studio. This is when you take a LAN event and do coverage for it externally. Now, what happens with this? You don't have that connection which connects the talent to the crowd. You don't have the players being connected directly to the stream that's actually having this. Now, this is a problem which you get with a lot of other language covering as well. So, the Brazilians probably have experienced this for their entire lives, apart from a couple of events, because they do a lot of their coverage external. They do it from their home, and they do it in setups just like this. And it's very, very difficult to create the type of move that an audience member is expecting, because what we're talking about previously is taking this coverage, the ESL coverage, and transferring this to a Twitch viewer or a Facebook viewer or whatever viewer, as close to it as possible, like you were there. This is what the live streaming is meant to try and achieve. Now, this is a lot harder to do when you got a couple of guys who also aren't feeling the energy. This is kind of what's inspiring me to talk about this. And this is why I'm going to get to it in just a bit about what a commentator needs when they do events like this. But for a viewer, I just wanted to highlight the fact that when you tune into a broadcast, you're probably expecting a certain level of coverage, a certain level of energy that comes along with it. Now, there are people who are expecting different types of energy based on the type of coverage they want to have or the coverage they're getting it from. Now, you have meme coverage, which was highlighted very, very heavily during the TI qualifiers when you had both Beyond the Summit as well as Moonduck basically just memeing the crap out of each other for this. Of course, it mainly started at the BTS up in their loft studio that they did coverage from, where they were all dead tired as hell, and they just started inserting memes all across the screen while I was sitting there in my joint Dota studio trying to do like the official coverage. And it was a very, very different kind of thing. So you still have to understand that the crowds are wanting a different level of coverage. But when you have something like the International, you want to have the full-on top-notch coverage. That's what you want. Like, this is the pinnacle, and you as a scene want to be able to display what is the best we have to offer. Now, if someone came in and they're watching the MDL coverage and saying this is what Dota has become, you'd have a lot of questions being asked. Like, even when StarCraft 2, if you want to say StarCraft 2 was dying, it still is dying, or whatever life cycle they were at, they were still always having really professional studios every single time. There was no dodginess about it. It was always professional as hell. And this just meant that you knew that you were getting that type of coverage. Like, it's the ESL cookie cutter coverage. You know what you're going to get. It's going to be a panel, it's going to be casters, it's going to be people in suits, it's going to be people talking about the game, then analyzing the game, then going to the game for hypecast, and then back to a stage host. You know what you're going to get every single time you tune in for this. And when someone tunes into MDL, and you imagine, like, someone's like, oh, I want to see what the scene's like. And they don't know. They don't know there's many, many options, and there's a lot of variety that comes in the types of coverage, which happens for our events. What they look at is, this is a major. This is the tournaments that used to be held, the ones that were in Boston, in Frankfurt, in Shanghai, maybe forget that. Like, these are the levels. Like, people complain so much when Shanghai went awry, and it's because there's a level of expectation to achieve a really good show, to put our best foot forward. So when people say, oh man, yeah, you're down 600,000 people in Dota in just the last 18 months, that the ends can come back. Yeah, we're still raising the same price pool that we always had for TI. We've still got the viewership, and we've still got everything that we had before in the same level of professionalism or the same quality level that we had previously. But this is a difficult thing to argue when you have coverage like this from MDL, or the majors don't live up to expectations. Minors are actually better than major coverages. A lot of things like this go very, very wrong. So, summarize that, because I realize I'm going on a little bit too long on this point, is the fact that you have to understand there's different types of coverage. There's different coverage expectations that come for events, be it online coverage, be it minors, be it majors. And even if it's like more like Take TV or the Summit kind of style, it's a very unique way of presenting things. But you got to know your audience, and you got to know the expectations of the community and the moods that everyone associates with these different types of coverages. Of course, the expectations is the huge thing, right? Like, I have my expectations of what I want to see from the scene. So I sit there, I'm like, you know what? Minors should all be about the little guys. It's about teams being discovered. It's about teams having opportunities. Majors should be about the top teams actually being there and earning the respect that comes from winning that title. I actually even want to take DPC points out of it at that point, because I think it's almost a distraction from even just that basic achievement. Virtus Pro win how many events in a row? Do you actually care about it when you're like, well, they've already won DPC points. I don't care that they're winning more. Yet it meant so much more when OG won time and time again all of the majors, and you're like, damn, this is an achievement. It's not TI, but it's still a huge achievement. And these are the expectations which don't, for me, appear with a lot of this coverage. Now, how do you bring this back? How do you get these expectations to live up to to live up to what you want them to be? Now, you could think about like the events which really shook the world, and people like, oh man, this is unbelievable. When Roshan on this epicenter stage for the first time crashed into the stage, everyone's like, man, I can't believe they're doing stage mapping, and these booths look so amazing, and the whole environment just felt really, really cool. Yay, first epicenter. And then it kind of died off a little bit after that. Yeah, you had a big stage, but it didn't really have that same atmosphere. It didn't have that same kind of level of expectation. It was big, it was cool, but it was one feature here or there. And this is where, like, it's always hard. Like, you put in a great effort, then how do you maintain that level? And the only ones who I know maintain that level are groups like ESL, because they understand just how far they can go without going too far over it, and then they try and have their one cool feature every single event, so it kind of stands out a little bit, and they've got a little PR to work with. But because they also step backwards a couple of times as well, and this was my complaint as well about Birmingham, because for me, I put a lot of expectations on myself as a commentator. So while you as a crowd have expectations for events, have expectations of how you consume the coverage, as a commentator, I have an expectation of myself for the type of coverage that I provide, understanding my audience is changing. So when we do online casting, when I was doing all those wonderful little cups of no-name teams, and we were just having fun, and it was more of like a standard Twitch stream where you just communicate with your subscribers kind of thing. Like that's kind of what it felt like. Then you stepped up a little bit more when you had like online qualifiers for big events. So doing like coverage for ESL One, this was important because it was a team having a chance to prove that they could actually make it to the event. And it was that storyline which was my primary focus. And I'm like, yeah, this is cool. So you have to give a level of fun to it, but you also need to step it up. And then when you reach the main event, you're like, okay, this is when it really matters. And it's insulting to the teams and their performances if you just joke about it while you're there and you don't give it your 100%. And this can translate, I think, into the viewership base as well when a caster is not giving, or a panelist is not giving it 100%, where they just sit there and it's like, I don't care, I just think this team will win. Okay, my panel segment is over. I always thought one of the best panels that I ever saw was... I need to hit this one, get rid of that, and get rid of that. This panel. Now, you may remember this one. This was ESL One Frankfurt. This was a very long time ago. But what you got from this panel were a bunch of people that really wanted to break things down. This was very fresh in a lot of people's careers. It was very fresh for like the first time that a football stadium in Germany had ever hosted a big esport event, so everyone was pretty hyped for this. Bruno, unfortunately, not in this picture. But it was so intense at that event because everyone really cared what the result was going to be. Like, yeah, it was close to TI, but it still felt like when the panel came together, they had great conversations which were very, very stimulating, and they're the things that you don't just close down your stream during it and then wait for the game to begin and then you open up your stream again. You listened, you enjoyed the personalities that were there, and this is what I kind of like I wish would come back. But this is the standard, the levels, like the energy that you wanted to have when you go into an event. Now, we were on the side of this big arena when we did this. We're up on the VIP area, so we're actually really close to VIPs as well, so they can come and meet us and talk to us like in between the games or after the games. So another reason why people come to live events. But what I kind of want to like get to is it's this. It's the caster desk. Now, the caster desk is something which gets forgotten a lot. Now, it's understandable because the caster's desk is normally only visible for about 10 to 15 seconds during a broadcast, especially when you already have a panel. And myself, like, I'm actually along the lines of saying, hey, you don't actually need a caster's desk. Like, if you have a lower third which shows our names as well as has a picture, so you can at least associate our face to the voice, this is okay for me. But something which is really important, and this has happened a couple of times at events, where the caster's desk is hidden away from the crowd, from the audience. Now, this is bad for me on two fronts. The first front is the amount of messages you get saying, hey, are you even here? Like, are you actually casting this event? The worst it's probably got was when I was casting at ESL One Hamburg. And we weren't even inside the venue. We were out inside of this Mercedes truck, which was meant to be the VIP box, and turned into our casting area. And we were next to the panel as well, and the sound was bouncing off all the glass, and it was very unfeeling. But you realize something of what you need as a caster. And as a caster myself, I need to be in the environment that has the game, especially when you have a crowd that is listening to you. It's very, very similar to like a lot of you probably understand that I did theater back in the day. And when you do theater and you make a joke on stage, or there's a funny kind of line that comes out, or you finish singing and everyone's applauding, if you can't hear the crowd, how do you know when to start up again? Like, when do you deliver the next line? When do you say thank you? When do you bow even for a crowd if you couldn't see or hear this type of energy? That's a very similar thing when you make a joke, or when a crowd wants to try and interact with you, and a crowd will do this. A crowd will boo, a crowd will start clapping, they'll start doing a whole bunch of things. And if you don't hear this, if the audio is not pumped into your headset correctly, which it very rarely is, because the best mics, by the way, are actually the ones that are on the caster's heads. They're the ones that pick up the crowd more often than not. When you don't hear this, you lose that connection. And this is why I spent so long talking about expectations before, because the crowd has expectations that you are there to make their event even better. And viewers on the stream also have that expectation that, one, they hear the crowd, and two, they understand that there is something going on together, all of them together at that event. But when you create a disconnection in this, then you start to ask questions. You start to ask, does the commentator even know what he's doing? Like, I could have been talking about DK and how amazing the hero is and how I wish he was being picked up, and the crowd is just booing the crap out of me. I'm like, I'm glad the crowd agrees with me, and I have just made the worst mistake I could have ever have done, because the crowd obviously understands I don't hear them. Now, luckily that didn't happen, because before the game started, I actually sat out on the edge of the rail trying to listen to the crowd and listen to how they were reacting. And in a couple of games too, I sat out in the audience as well, trying to just feel what was going on. So I tried to find ways around it, but we were backstage at ESL One Birmingham, and I feel really sad about this, because it's one of these things that you attend an event for the first time in England. The crowd is awesome. It would be like casting an event in Manila and not being exposed to the crowd, being hidden backstage somewhere. Like, it makes you really, really sad. And it makes you feel really inadequate as a caster, because you can't create the same moments. You can't create the same energy, the same focus that you can when you're at an event and you know that's going on and you're not connected to it. And I have the same feeling. It's not as strong when I cast online tournaments, or I cast like remote for events. So like if I was casting, which happened when we were doing the coverage for the Russian major, or Kiev major, sorry. So when that happened, like we were casting the group stage matches with cameras on the players, and we were doing this from Romania. And when we did that, I was like, there's this huge disconnection that you have, and you're like, how can I feel what these players are meant to be feeling when I'm not even in the same building as them, or in the same area, or in the same country as them? It's very, very difficult to do. And it connects even more than that. And I think it was Nahaz that actually explained, like, was saying that I was talking about this backstage at Birmingham, and he was saying, like, you sound like a vampire. And I'm like, I'll explain this. It's like, well, expect everyone to have the life drained out of them inside of a venue the way you talk about things. And I'm like, well, that's actually right in a lot of ways. Like, when a crowd listens to a cast of mine and I'm on the PA system, the best feeling that I would have at the end of it is if I'm sitting there totally exhausted because I've taken all of the crowd's energy and I've expended every single bit of it. So we're all sitting there exhausted. This for me is like the pinnacle, because I can't reach moments. It's a disaster line. The one that happened with that fantastic Ice Blast Echo Slam, it would never have happened if I didn't have that crowd there. I would never be able to create such a moment. And this is the way I cast, though. Like, some people, yeah, they can probably fabricate this kind of stuff. Me, no. It's not the way I do it. I'm true to what I feel and the emotions that are riding with me at the time. And that's why I refer to myself as a reflex caster, because I don't plan things. I just do things. So I can think about some stuff beforehand, but very rarely. The best moments I have is when I'm not thinking and I'm just doing. This is what makes it great. And that's when I rely on the crowd to give me that energy, to give me that level of commentating, like skill and just delivery that is only really achievable when you work in a perfect sync. Like, I have a picture of me and Sind up here. Sind gets my energy. Like, Sind and I, we talked about this kind of stuff as well. Like, it's like, what can he do to make me feel better when I'm doing my play-by-play? And what could he do to make the viewer feel better when I'm also doing my play-by-play? That's why I'm like, it took me a while to get used to. Like, Sind comes in and says some things during a play, and normally, like, my instant reaction is I must respect my co-caster, must answer back exactly what he said. And I had to kind of let go of this a little bit during the cast. And it's for the better, definitely, because it's all about amplifying those moments. So I'm working with my co-caster, I'm working with the crowd, and then I sync this together, and that's when we hit the end of it. The expectation that you have as a viewer to feel the LAN presence, to feel like you're there, and if you are there, to feel amazing. Give me that energy even more, because you feel amazing, and then I just keep playing this game with you, where we're just sharing energy, and eventually we'll all be bone dry and feeling very, very satisfied. It is what you want to have when you go to an event. Now, I will say this. I did talk to ESL about this a while ago back at Hamburg, and they started to correct it. This was a relapse a little bit, and I talked to them once again and was told that it will be corrected again. But they're not the only ones. Like, there's been a couple of events which have kind of shut us away in the corners. Luckily, not many of it do these days, but this was one of the primary reasons I was driven to talk about this today. And I hope it gives you an idea of like how much energy and where the energy comes from when you do events like this, how much the talents push themselves when they do events like this as well, and how much we really appreciate you as a crowd for being awesome, for being energetic. It's difficult sometimes. You have very long days. Some of these days can drag on 12 plus hours, and you're sitting in a stadium seat which was designed for like a 2-hour game of football or a 3-hour concert, and you're sitting there for an entire day. I'm not surprised people try and bring cushions. It's really, really appreciated by myself when this happens, and I always appreciate good crowds. And whenever someone says like, where do you want to go to cast an event, I'm like, wherever the Dota's going to be good and wherever the crowd's going to be good. These are the two things that I just love and adore, and the more you have, the better the cast can get. And it is always going to be the pinnacle of commentators to prove that they are tier 1 casters that can deliver on that level. When you can sit in front of a huge crowd, it doesn't even need to be speaking your language. Like, you can still fuel off the Russians as well as the Chinese. I've done that as well. And you just find this level of energy and broadcast that connects with every single viewer that's tuning in. That's, for me, something I never want to give up, and it's one of the driving reasons why I still, after so many years, like I've now been in the esport world for 16 years, commentating at LAN events for over 10 of them, I still want to keep doing it because of that feeling. So every time I have it, it's great. And it gives me more inspiration to continue to commentate. So this, for me, I'm highlighting it right now, driving force in my life. Hope you understand that as well, and hope you understand why I've been such a lazy bum and need to do more of these Toby talks. I hopefully will do more of them in the future. You can check out some of the old ones. I also did some caster tutorial videos. The analyst stuff of the caster submissions will come eventually when I have a little bit more time. I started work very recently on some work on a new game of mine that I have a game concept, so we're trying to bring that up, so I'll probably tell you more about that once we actually have more to show. And for that, I think that's a full wrap-up. So thanks for watching, everyone. Hope you enjoyed my conversation, and I will return with more content at some time. Thank you.